Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of T-Dog RC. This is going to be episode 1 of the build of the VQ Models Flybaby. If you've watched the preview to that, then you'll know I'm going to be putting a Saito twin cylinder 40cc petrol engine in, so it's going to be a real beauty. In this episode we're going to be starting with the wings. I always usually start with wings on these sorts of builds. So we're going to get those on the bench, get them all set up, get the servos installed and all that sort of stuff. So without further ado, let's get those on the bench and let's get stuck in. Okay, so we're on the bench at last. So we've got to get this first wing done. So I'm going to get this one done and then just crack on with the other one off camera. So first thing we've got to do is, it's got this aileron hatch, servo hatch here. Got a standard servo that we're going to put in there. There's a string line in here already which they left in for you, which is handy. See if you can just see that there. So that we can use to pull the servo cable through. We're going to have to put a pretty big extension lead on it because it's got to go obviously right to the end. And then in one of the bags there are these wooden blocks, and we need to basically get, well, there's wooden blocks and wooden dowels. The dowels are for the ends of the wings, which I'll show you in a minute. Well, first thing we've got to do is get a couple of these wooden blocks out, and then we've just got to put those in position there. There are some marks on this, they've like laser printed some marks, so you line those up and then glue those in position. I think I'm probably going to use some wood glue underneath, but just lock them in place with some CA. So let me get this off a minute and then move the wing out of the way. So I don't need that just yet. So let's get the servo out. It's going to put the control arm's going to go like that, obviously the other way around because it's actually going to go through there. But in terms of actually just getting it in position, it's actually going to go like that. So let's just put it like that for now. And then we can line these blocks up. And of course I want to make sure, see, actually if you put these blocks where it suggests you put them, it's actually miles off the servo, so I think it's just to give you a guide really. Let's try putting them on the inside there. Anyway, it doesn't really matter because all we need to do is make sure that they're in line with our servo. Just opened up the slot so I can get this in, sort of get this positioned where I want. So it really wants to be in the middle. So my advice would be to completely ignore the lines that are on here. Certainly for this it's in completely the wrong position. So that's going to go like that, and then, as I say, going to get some wood glue on these, but then I'm just going to wick a little bit of CA in just to lock them in place and then leave them to dry. So problem is my wood glue is completely messed up, so let me just sort this out. Okay, slight correction, I just read the manual, haha, and there's actually, so it does say to CA these in place, and then it's got these little wood screws that you screw in from the other side just to secure it in place. So it is, you're not just relying on the glue, which is good, so no need to use the wood glue really. So same drill as before. I'm going to get this lined up so it's in the middle, and a little drop of CA on that bottom edge just to lock it in place, and then we'll take the servo out. A little bit of CA on the top there, a little bit on the bottom just to get that locked in place. Then we can take the servo out. Hopefully it's not glued on. Like that. Then let's get some more CA soaked in here. And then what we can do is we can just drill through from the other side, get one of these screws in, and that should be nicely locked in place. Okay, so that's worked out really nice. Servo fits in there really nice and snug, as you can see. There's a, yeah, fits in there spot on. So next job I've got to do is just mark out the holes, drill those for the servo screws, and then yeah, I've just drilled through, put these, they're like 8mm screws on this side, so drilled through, put the screw in, backed it back out, and then dripped some CA, thin CA into there to really strengthen that up. So that's really nice and strong now. So next job is to mark this up and then get it drilled out, get all the servo screws put in. The only thing I'm going to have to watch is the servo screws don't hit those screws going through the wood. So I'm going to have to see what happens with that, but if potentially I might need to use some smaller screws, but we'll have a look at that. But first of all, I'll get this marked up and then get the servo set up, and I'll show you it all sorted. Okay, that's got the servo all fastened on, nice secure fitting. What I have done though is, as I suspected, the servo screws that came with the Hi-Tech were too long to go in, because it hits these, kind of a bit of a design flaw I suppose. But I've got, I use rcworld.co.uk, they do these really nice little packs of these high quality sort of servo screws with hex heads in. So I prefer these anyway, because they're just much nicer, because you tend to find with the little servo screws the heads always mash up, even on pretty good quality like Hi-Tech. These are slightly shorter, so these are 11mm, and they've gone in perfect there, so that holds that in nice and tight, nice and secure. So we can get that fastened into the model now. So next job is got to drill some holes in the corners, so we can screw this down into the actual wing. So I'll get the wing on the bench, we'll take a look at that. Okay, so I've just sat the servo in here. I'm not going to fasten it down just yet, because we've got to do a bit of messing around first. So next job I'm going to do is get the control horn fastened on to the aileron. And surprisingly, actually, these control horns, I thought they were going to be the ones where you cut a slot into here and epoxy it in, but they bolt or screw all the way through with a plastic piece on the other side, to those sorts. But the aileron's really thick, but they do supply you with some really long bolts to go through. That's one of the plates for the other side, so we'll be nice and secure. The only thing I'm going to do differently from the instructions is they say to put in here on the servo arm those, in fact let me show you, I think you'll probably see those sorts of things there, where they screw into the servo arm, you fasten them up on the other side with a little nut, which you're supposed to use silicone sealer or something to secure it in place, because you can't use Loctite with it being a plastic servo arm. And then you put a little grub screw in the top to secure the control rod in. I'm not a massive fan of those. I just think there's a lot that could go wrong. It could come unscrewed from the bottom of the servo arm. The grub screw could come out, and obviously you can Loctite that. And you're just relying on the friction, of course, which means if you could get, I guess, file a flat onto this, but it's pretty thin. So I'm not going to do that anyway. So I'm just going to, I've got some Z-bend pliers, and I'm just going to create a Z-bend to go through here and just make sure that this is a really good fit. So I'm going to make this really snug so there's no movement in that. And what I'm going to do that is I'm going to cut this to size first, and then I'm going to use a bit of the offcut and actually use that to attach it to my drill and drill the hole using the wire, so that way you get an absolutely perfect fit. So it works quite well. So first thing I need to do is get this lined up. So I need to get the clevis onto the control horn. Okay, it's a pretty tight fit on there as well, so that's good because there's no sort of slop on that either. And then I just need a Sharpie. So we're going to get this lined up. Make sure the holes are on the hinge line. And then we're going to need the Z-bend about there. So just put a little mark where I need the Z-bend. And then the other thing I've made sure is that on the clevis side I've got plenty of adjustment available. Can't quite see this, it's not going to focus, but I can basically move this a fair bit, so just in case I don't get the Z-bend bang on, I've still got some movement to adjust it. Okay, so I've got my Z-bend pliers, handy bits of kit these are. I'm going to line up my mark with one of the peaks and the trough, and then give it a good squeeze, and there we've got a nice Z-bend. So then what I'm going to do, as I said, is I'm just going to trim a piece of this off now and use that in my drill. I'll still leave myself plenty of metal on there for the Z-bend, but I'll probably cut some more off that once it's in place. So yeah, just get the drill and then just literally use this piece of wire as if it was a drill bit to drill the servo arm out. So I'm just going to get that done and I'll show you the result. Okay, so that's gone in there real nice. As you can see, I have just trimmed that down. We've got a real nice Z-bend there and it's really tight. There's no slop at all in that. And yes, over time, you know, you can argue that it could make the hole a little bit bigger, but I'm not going to be flying this thing every day, so it's going to last me a long time, hopefully, like that. But yeah, that's just nice. There's very little movement at all in that. In fact, I think the only bit of movement is just a slight bit of play in the servo itself. So that's that sorted, and then I'm not relying on any grub screws or anything like that. So then I'm just going to get the aileron level, and then this is going to go about here, so that the holes are right over the hinge line there, so that's perfect. So yeah, just got to mark these out, drill through, and then attach those. I won't bother filming that, I'm sure people know how to put control horns on. I'll show you once that's hooked up. Next thing I just need to do is get an extension lead, which I'll just fasten on and feed through, and then what I do is on the actual extension lead itself, I just put some heat shrink tubing over that just to make sure it's not going to come undone. Also with the extension lead, because it's quite a long one, and it's going to be a little tricky to feed it through. Well, I have got that piece of string that they left, so it won't be too bad, but always just make sure you test the servo with the extension lead plugged in before you feed it all through, because if for some reason there's a problem with the extension lead, you got to do the whole thing over again, and by that point you've pulled your string through. So I'm going to get all that done and then show you the finished result. Okay, that's got that sorted. So I've screwed the servo plate in. The only thing I would say is that these don't seem very strong, the servo plate, but I've used some of those nice servo screws again, so I've got really good quality screws in there, and I've put these in and dripped some CA in again, so should be okay. But it'd be a bit nicer if the wood was a little bit thicker around there. But yeah, got loads of movement. Servo's working nicely, so that's all good. So I've got one last little job to do on this wing, is just turn it over, and then you've got to put these little sort of supports on to take the metal cables that attach the fuselage, which is kind of just for show, but going to put those on. So I'm just going to get the bits out for that and show you what I need to do. Okay, so these are the things I'm talking about. So they just come in the kit, so just these little plywood pieces, and there are slots already cut into the wings. I had to just make this one a little bit bigger, and it's a pretty tight fit, but just goes in like that, and then I'm just going to wick some CA into that, fasten those in position, and then there's a whole load of cables to rig up, but I'm not going to bother with that now. That'll all be done when we get the model finished, because there's no point in messing around with this now and having cables hanging around until it's kind of right near the end, basically. So just going to get those CA'd in, and that's the wing done. And then obviously going to crack on with the other wing, and then we're completely done with the wings. So pretty easy job on these. Oh, sorry, there is one last job I've got to do. I keep forgetting about this. Let me just quickly show you that. So in this pack here, there are some dowels. So we've just got to round the ends of those off, and then we've just got to just get those in there. Again, nice tight fit. What I'll do is I'll mark sort of halfway on these, so we know that we've got them in as they should be. And then again, they just CA in, and they're just sort of locator pins to help you put the wing in. And obviously you've got the main aluminium spar that goes in there. So yeah, that's last little job is just to get those fastened in. So yeah, I'm going to crack on with that, get the other wing all done, and then next thing after that, really, yeah, so what I'm going to do once I've done the wings, which will be on the next episode, is going to be getting the engine installed, which is always an interesting one, especially cutting the cow. It's always a little bit nerve-wracking. So yeah, I think we'll get the engine installed, probably get the undercarriage put on. That'll be the next episode, and then after that we'll be getting all the tail set up, horizontal stabilizer, rudder put in place, getting all those connected up, servos installed for those, and then yeah, just the final few finishing off bits. So probably another couple of episodes we'll have this done. It's fairly straightforward build. So if you're enjoying this, then it'd be great to have you on board as a subscriber. Just hit the subscribe button. Doesn't cost you anything if you're into fixed wing, balsa and engines and all that sort of stuff. Then please subscribe to the channel. Love to have you on board. Thanks for everyone that has subscribed, and if you want to keep up to date with this project, then hit the bell icon, and then YouTube will notify you when I bring the next video out. So yeah, I will see you soon for the next one.